Yeah, first we'll generate a positive motivation. Then we'll break this, 2 hours or maybe a little shorter. So we'll break the session, this 2 hour session into two halves, about 45 minutes each, and then have about a 15-minute break in the middle. So the first half is on identifying the object of negation, which is what we covered in the second, I think the second session of the 6 sessions of the course. So again, if you have notes or the outlines or anything from related to that, you're welcome to have it open nearby you, where you can glance at it while we meditate. Yeah, liberation in the palm of your hand is a good thing to have. Okay. See, Jan pulled out liberation in the palm of your hand. That's a good thing to have nearby. Yeah, that's the outlines I based, most of it on, and the essence of the Heart Sutra. Yeah, all those are, of course, good. And Lamrim year. Okay, that I've heard of. I haven't looked at yet. Okay. Anyway, and so we'll the first half on identifying the object of negation, and then the second half on um, refuting the self of persons, the 4-point analysis, the 4-part analysis, which has 4 main steps: refuting the object of, refuting the self of persons. So we'll go through that. Okay, so I'll add more as we go. But first, get comfortable in your meditation posture. And then, take a few deep breaths. And see that you're relaxed and comfortable. And then gradually focus your attention on an object of placement meditation. Generate some mental focus and set your intention for the session. I think for the next 45 minutes or so, we'll meditate to try and identify the object of negation and the sense or the inherently existent self, which actually does not exist and yet appears to exist, which is to be refuted. So then, if you like, you can visualize oneself surrounded by all sentient beings, with one's father of this life to one's right, and one's male friends and family to your right and behind you. Then your mother of this life to your left, female friends and family to your left and behind you. And then those who you're most prone to become angry with, seated directly in front of you, facing towards you. And all the other sentient beings who exist, seated all around. So reflect how oneself and all of the sentient beings are the same, wishing to be free from every multiple, infinite forms of suffering, and are the same and wishing to have stable, lasting happiness. So especially within mind, so especially with it in mind that all forms of suffering that we experience through the force of afflictive emotions and karma from life to life to life without end, all arise from this fundamental ignorance, grasping at phenomena, oneself and other things as existing from their own side. Mm. So for that purpose, then it's very meaningful to meditate on the wisdom, realizing emptiness, which is the antidote to this fundamental cause of all suffering. Mm. So with that in mind, then generate a positive motivation for engaging in this session for one's own purpose, for one's own welfare, for the welfare of others. And then if one likes, you can generate a mind of refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Visualize the refuge field in the space in front of you, and then generate the attitude of going for refuge to the Buddha Dharma Sangha. And then requesting them to assist one in meditating on emptiness. Okay, so then we can begin the actual part of the session. So as you remember, there's two main ways to try to identify the object of negation. Well, first there's a description, descriptions of it, which we've gone through many. Oh, I need the screen sharing. I'm not sure whose that is. Um, but mainly it's a sense of that things exist independently, in and of their own right, or by their power, or from their own side, so that things exist, well, in just the way that they appear. This is through the force of being habituated to ignorance from countless lives. Then even to our sense consciousness, also our thought consciousness, then things appear to just exist as they are and as what they are, um, kind of through the force of their own essence, without relying upon other things, without relying upon their causes and conditions, or without relying upon their parts, and especially without relying upon the mind which labels things like this is this, upon that collection of parts, um, parts both spatially and parts in terms of moments in time, and then parts also in terms of different instances, and also existing in relation to other things. So, yeah, so I'll share my screen. And I want to find this. So there's this quote by Chandrakirti. It's kind of most succinct. Meaning of the object of negation. The thing known as the self, right? So the self, quote unquote, self is object of negation here, means inherently existent self. So the thing known as the self is an entity whose nature is not to be the outcome of any other functional phenomena. So its nature is something that's not the outcome, not the result of, not dependent upon any other functional phenomena. And selflessness is its non-existence. Right? And then His Holiness, I'll leave this quote up. So the ignorance grasping at the object of negation as existing, it mistakenly assumes that people and things exist in and of themselves by their own nature. Right. So we've gone through different descriptions of the object of negation. So now we need to, we need to try to identify it in our own experience. So one, probably the easiest way to identify it is to think of a time. So yeah, there's a self of phenomena and self of persons. Now we're focusing on the self of person. So how we as a person appear to exist as existing from our own side or inherently. So the easiest probably way to identify it is to think of a time, especially a time when we become defensive. We're falsely accused of doing something wrong. But it also arises, when any afflictive emotion arises: anger, attachment, greed, jealousy, embarrassment, um, um, selfishness. When any afflictive emotion arises, then there's a stronger sense of grasping at a self existing from its own side. The stronger the afflictive emotion arises, the stronger that sense of grasping at self is. But especially defensiveness, when somebody accuses us of doing something wrong, we become defensive. Think, how could you say that? I didn't do that. Then the sense of I is very strong. So let's try that first. But just remember that when we're looking for this, we're not looking for some kind of intellectually created sense of I. We're looking for a sense of I that arises spontaneously. Because this is a kind of grasping that all sentient beings have, from humans to devas to animals, ghosts, even insects. They all have this kind of grasping at an I. So it's not something we have by having studied Buddhism. It's something that naturally, spontaneously arises. And again, it's one that whenever any disturbing state of mind arises, any afflictive emotions arise, it's there, it's present at that time. The stronger the afflictive emotion is, the stronger the sense of grasping at I. This sense of I is, this false I is. So, yeah, so look at some instances in the past when you were falsely accused of doing something wrong, or one of the other examples I gave, when other afflictive emotions arise. And then with a corner of your mind, so the important thing is to remember, as you remember this situation in the past when an afflictive emotion arose, you want to put yourself, imagine being in that situation again and experiencing that sense of, defensiveness, or greed or jealousy or whatever, anger. And then the corner of your mind, so you want to kind of have a sense of that afflictive emotion arise. And with a corner of your mind, you look to see, how does the I appear in that moment. Right? Yeah. So why don't we just try to do that for at least 10 minutes, and then maybe I'll add something more. And then another technique, you can continue with that, or another technique you might try is um, instead of looking at uh, a time when we have an afflictive emotion arise, just look at a more when we have a more neutral state of mind. So just like now in the present moment, as one's meditating, um, sort of look at how the self appears to exist. And it can help by asking self-referential questions. So things like, where am I? What am I doing? What's my name? Or who am I? How old am I? So you can just mentally ask questions about yourself, especially though, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm meditating, but then who's meditating? So as you ask these questions to get a sense of just the ordinary sense of self arising in the present moment, then again, with a corner of your mind, look to see how that self appears to exist. And then you can also compare, go back and forth between, when we intellectually think, how it exists in dependence upon causes and conditions and parts and mental imputation. Does it appear to exist in that way, or does it appear to be just there, from its own side, being I, as it is, without depending upon anything else? So when we take another 10 minutes, you can try that method if you like as well. Trying to identify how the I, sense of self, ordinarily appears to exist from its own side, independently, by its own power. So now I'd encourage you to, so we'll continue trying to identify the object of negation. Um, but maybe, because it's important to generate the habit of, in daily life, trying to look for how the I appears, how the sense of self appears, especially identifying this object of negation, the false sense of self, as it appears day to day in daily life. So I'd encourage you to think of situations that these days you regularly encounter when it would seem there's a stronger sense of I, grasping at this false I existing from its own side arises, whether it's, a situation when you get irritated, like driving in heavy traffic, or when you feel anxious, like trying to buy a lot of things at the grocery store, or, encountering a certain person that you find very provoking, they irritate you, or whatever. So think of different situations you encounter in daily life when there's a stronger sense of I arising. And then related to that is ask yourself the question, is it really the case that the stronger the grasping at I arises, that kind of false grasping at an inherently existent self, is that really produce afflictive emotions? Does it really give rise to? Is it a cause of afflictive emotions arising? And thereby, if I weaken it, eliminate it, is it possible really um, to reduce and eliminate afflictive emotions? Of course, that's a much bigger set of questions, but let's keep that there, kind of um, related to, as you try to identify false, this grasping out of false I. Okay, so let's meditate for another 10 minutes, looking at how this kind of ignorance grasping at a self or existing from its own side arises in different situations in daily life. So let's relax our attention now and take a break. So is 10 minutes enough, or would you prefer 15? I think a 10-minute break. Yeah, 10 minutes. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break, and then so next we'll look at the reasoning, the 4-point analysis, right, to establish selflessness of persons. Any questions from the first half? Okay. So let's do this analysis. I think we'll do it. There's kind of, well, there's the 4-point analysis, but I think we'll do the first 10 or 15 minutes. We'll do there. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, often when he gives instruction on how to meditate on the selflessness of persons, he gives kind of a shortened form of the 4 analysis. It's kind of simplified form. So I think we'll just do that. I'll lead you through that for the first, 15 minutes or so. And then the rest of the time, the remaining 30 minutes or so, we'll do, again, the whole 4-point analysis, but with a little bit more of the detailed sort of reasonings that are presented in the text. Okay, so first just, relax your mind, focus your mind. So, but remember, as you're doing that, remember the 4 points of the analysis. Well, anyway, maybe just relax your mind and focus your mind first, and then I'll tell you the 4 points. Mhm. Yeah, so the 4 points again are identifying the object of negation, and then mm, ascertaining the 2 uh, possibilities, so that if, the object of negation being an inherently existent self of persons, or an inherently existent person. So if that does exist, it must either be one with the aggregates or different from the aggregates. The aggregates being the constituents of one's self as a person, one's body and mind, in short, or the 5 aggregates. So if the inherently existent person exists, must be either one with the aggregates or separate from the aggregates, different from. There's no other possibility. There's no third possibility. And then the third point is that um, an inherently existent person cannot be one with the aggregates, right? Um, is not one with the aggregates. And in Lama Zopa Rinpoche's method, it's not associated with the aggregates in any way, right? It's not findable either. It's not findable within one's body and mind. And then the 4th point is not findable outside of one's body and mind. So it's not different from the aggregates. And then the conclusion, which is not really one of the 4 points, is that, well, therefore it doesn't exist, right? And that's the mind realizing emptiness, when we realize that that inherently existent person doesn't exist at all. The world is empty of that. I am empty of that. So then once we arrive at that conclusion, then we try to just keep focus our awareness, our wisdom deeply in that. Mhm. Okay, so now, let's try to meditate. So also I wanted to mention before I didn't is, so this is that same Lama Zopa Rinpoche's kind of method, meditating on selfless persons. So first identifying the object of negation. Rinpoche will say how, okay, so how does the ignorance grasping at the person existing from its own side arise? Is first the aggregates have to appear. Whenever we think, I, so in relation to oneself, whenever we think I'm doing this, I'm walking, I'm sitting, I'm meditating, I'm talking, I'm unhappy, I'm tired. Whenever we think I in any context, first our aggregates have to appear. The body and mind have to appear. We don't look at, across the room and think, oh, I'm I'm over there. Right? So first our body and mind have to appear, or our aggregates, either our mind or our body appears to the mind. And then based on the aggregates, we label I. And maybe, I'm sitting, I'm sleeping, I'm walking, I'm eating, I'm tired, I'm happy, I'm worried. So the aggregates appear. Upon the aggregates, we label I. And then the I appears back to us as if it's not labeled by the mind. And then we believe it exists like that. Right? Then we grasp at the I existing as something not merely labeled by the mind, but existing by its own power. So reflect on that for a few minutes to generate, a sense of was that true or not, and generate a sense of the object of negation. So again, the aggregates appear, we label I, and then the I appears back to us as if it's not merely labeled by the mind. It exists from its own side. And then we grasp at that as being real, being true. So then the second step, ascertaining the two possibilities. So the way Lama Rinpoche presents it is we just recognize if the I exists like that from its own side, by its own power, as this concrete entity that does not depend upon being merely imputed by the mind on a basis of imputation. So if it exists in that way, the way it appears, it must be findable either within the aggregates, within our body and mind, or outside the body and mind. So when we search for it, we should be able to find it, and it must be findable either within the aggregates, our collection of our body and mind, or one either the body or the mind, or outside. If it's not findable either within the body and mind or separate from, then it doesn't exist at all. So just spend a moment ascertaining if that's true or not. So throughout the 4-point analysis, it'll happen that you lose a sense of what you're looking for. And then when that happens, you have to go back to the first step and generate the object of negation, a sense of the object of negation again. Just do that for a few moments and then pick up wherever you left off. So now the third step is, so look within the body and mind. So here especially regenerate that sense of the way the I ordinarily seems to exist from its own side. And then if it exists in that way, it must either be within the aggregates or separate from them. So now we look within the aggregates, third step. So first check all through the body. So this I seems to be existing from its own side. Often there's a sense of it being in the chest and the heart. So does it exist anywhere in the body? Does it exist in the heart, in the center of your chest? Analyze, look through all the lungs, the arteries, the atrium of the heart, the chambers of the heart, the ribs, the backbone. And then look up through your shoulders, your neck, your brain, and then down to the soles of your feet. Does the I exist anywhere within the body? Look even down to the level of the cells, all the fluids, the blood, and so forth. And then you might think, well, that self's not findable in the body, so it must be in the mind. So then look through different aspects of your mind, memories, thoughts, dreams, opinions, and see if you can find that self. Remember the object of negation, the sense of the self that seems to exist from its own side. Is it anywhere in the mind, the continuity of consciousness, perhaps? So check if it's anywhere in the mind for a few minutes. And finally, if that self we're looking for, if it's not findable in the body or in the mind, if it exists, then it must exist outside, separate from the body and mind. So can we find it there? Anywhere? Where would we find it outside of the body and mind? And then when you can't find it there, then just is it the case then that it doesn't exist? Try to generate the knowing that self that seemed to exist from its own side is totally non-existent, not findable anywhere. So first check outside of the body and mind. And then finally, if we can't find it separate from the body and mind, existing in any way, right, then strongly ascertain, then it doesn't exist at all. And abide in that sense of spaciousness. That is, yeah, object of negation wholly doesn't exist in the slightest. Mm. Okay. So now relax your attention for a minute. So that, in brief, is kind of how Lama Zopa Rinpoche usually recommends. And it's very useful to meditate that way because it's quite simple and it's something you can easily use in daily life. When you get used to it, you can see, oh, the eye is arising strongly now. Is it anywhere in my body? No. Is it anywhere in my mind? No. Is it outside somewhere else? No. It doesn't exist. Simple. Um, and another thing that's good about that that's helpful about that method is at the beginning, the way Rinpoche describes how to identify an object of negation. It's very helpful because it helps us to separate between the person that does exist, the person as we do exist, the I, the self that does exist, versus the object of negation, which does not exist, right? And the reason is because Rinpoche, makes the point strongly about how whenever we have a sense of self, first it depends upon our body or our mind or both of them appearing, right? So clearly our body is not us. Our mind is also not us. We possess a body, we possess a mind, but the body is not me. The mind is not me. So, so first those aggregates, they appear, the body and mind appear, and then upon that we label I, right? And that I, that is merely labeled upon the body and mind, that exists, right? And I think, I'm Lexok, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, that I exists, right? So that's not a problem, labeling. And so that is dependent arising, right? On dependence upon the body and mind. We label I, independence upon labeling I, thereby exist. So the problem is when now we label I upon the body and mind, but then the I appears back as if it wasn't labeled upon the body and mind, as if it exists really there from its own side. That also, I mean, that's a bit of a problem. That's through the force of ignorance. That in itself is not a big problem. The problem is when we accept that as real, right? So the I appears back as if it's not labeled by the mind, body and mind. That's a false appearance. And then we accept that to be reality, right? And we grasp at that I as being, the real I, the me. That's the big problem. That's ignorance, which is the root cause of all suffering. Mm. So, but thinking about that object of negation in that way, it helps to distinguish between the person that does exist, which is merely labeled upon the body and mind, versus the person that is the object of negation, which is the one that appears back as if it exists from its own side, and we grasp it as existing from its own side. Right? That one that exists from its own side is the object of negation. Okay, so now, yeah, we'll do a little bit. Well, we don't have so much time, so we'll go through the 4-point analysis, and I'll share my screen now, and we'll bring in some of these reasonings, especially that relate to the. I was going to share this when we were doing that last one, but I forgot. That relate to the third and fourth points of the 4-point analysis. Well, I'll leave this one up here first, related to the full set of possibilities. And then once we finish that, I'll go to this next one, which just lists some of the different reasonings. And I'll elaborate on them a little bit while we're meditating on those. The third and fourth point. Remember, the third point is establishing that inherently existent person is not one with the aggregates. And then the fourth, establishing that it's not different from the aggregates. The main one is the third, right? Establishing that it's not one with the aggregates. That's where most of the reasonings arise. Okay, so take a few deep breaths and let's meditate again for about 30 minutes. So begin by identifying the object of negation in one of the ways that we've just been, that we practiced earlier. There was when false say accuses you of doing something wrong, or when you get irritated, or yeah, just thinking about what am I doing, or in the way Rinpoche describes. So spend a couple minutes getting a sense of the object of negation. And then the second step is, the second point is that if the I inherently exists in the way it appears, it must either be one with the aggregates, or one with the basis of imputation of oneself, the person, or different from. And not only one, it must, if it inherently exists, it must be either inherently one with the aggregates or inherently different from the aggregates. There's only those two possibilities. If it doesn't exist in either of those two ways, then it means it doesn't exist. And an example again for that, to establish that reasoning is just that, for example, related to, I don't know, a vase. Anything that exists in the world is either one with vase, or different from vase. There's no third possibility. So you can take any object as the example, but anything that exists is either one with, let's say take any one object. Everything that exists in the world is either one with that object, identical to it, or different from it. So again, the object of negation, if it exists, if the I exists inherently in the way it appears, then in relation to the aggregates, it must be either inherently one with the aggregates or inherently different from them. There's no third possibility. So reflect on that for a couple minutes. Okay, so then the third step, that remember the object of negation, the I that appears to exist from its own side. So establishing that it's not one with the aggregates. So there, here there's listed 5 different reasons. I'll just briefly summarize each of them now, and then you can go through them at your own pace for about 7 minutes or so. So if the I is inherently one with the aggregates, then because they would be completely the same thing. They would be just identical. They would be the same thing. So they couldn't appear as two different things to the mind. That's the first one here. If they're inherently the same, they cannot appear as two different things to the mind because they would be exactly the same thing. But they do appear as two different things to the mind. Then the next, there would be the problem number, that the aggregates are a collection of many things, the body and mind, and then The body has many parts. The mind has many parts. So they're a collection of multiple things. Whereas the I is just one thing. So if they're inherently the same, then either the I has to also be multiple, like the aggregates, or the aggregates have to just be one, like the I, because they would be the same thing. They can't, right? They can't be that one is many and the other is just one thing. So there's a problem of number. And then the problem of possession. If the I is inherently one with the aggregates, then it can't be the case that the I is a possessor of the aggregates and the object and the aggregates are the possession of that I. So it can't be the case that, I have a body, I have a mind, because they would be the same thing. Right? It can't be the case that I have a body and mind, or my body and mind are possessed by me or controlled by me, as they would be inherently the same thing. So therefore, you couldn't have that kind of relationship. Then the fourth, there would be the problem of destruction in different continuums. So this means that just as when we die, then the aggregates, they cease to be a coherent collection, right? The body ceases to function. Most parts of the mind cease to function. So this collection of aggregates, it comes to an end as a conjoined kind of collection. So since the aggregates come to an end at the time of death, then the person would also end at the time of death, right? They would stop. It would be destroyed at that point. So there would be no future and past lives. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that for now. And then 5, the problem of functions. So here, it's that if the I is inherently one with the body, it can't perform the functions of the mind, of thinking, can't think and remember and have opinions and so forth. If the I is inherently one with the mind, then it can't perform the functions of physical functions, being seen and being touched, being able to be washed, and eating, walking, sitting, because the mind doesn't do those things. So yeah, that's that one. Maybe that's the least important. So yeah, those different reasonings, just think through those different reasonings for, again, if so thinking, go back to the object of negation, identify again, and think if it's inherently one with the body, inherently one with the aggregates, right? Then there's a problem of they can't appear as two separate things to the mind. They can't be different in number. One can't possess or be the possession of the other. And one was destroyed, the other is one aggregates are destroyed, one person is destroyed. Okay. Another problem with function is then one can't be something that's imputed upon the other. So think about those for about 7 minutes. Try to establish that the person, oneself, is not inherently one with aggregates. And then the fourth step, the self cannot be inherently different from, separate from the body and mind. So if you've lost a sense of what you're looking for, remember to go back to the first step, identifying the object of negation again for a few moments, and then continue. But here in the fourth step, the reasoning is simply that if the self existed as something inherently different from the body and mind, then it could exist totally independently, totally independent of, separate from, not reliant or not related to at all to the aggregates. So in a place where the aggregates do not exist, we should be able to find something that is self itself. But we can easily see that's not possible at all. So that's the main reasoning in the last step. So reflect on that for a few minutes. So finally, try to ascertain clearly, and you might want to just briefly go through the four steps again, just within a couple minutes, and then ascertain clearly the conclusion that I, self, that appears to exist from its own side, doesn't exist in that way at all, not in the slightest. And then generate the mind strongly recognizing that, knowing that, and just abide in that recognition. So that kind of wisdom, realizing the emptiness of the person existing from its own side or inherently. Okay. So we can relax our attention there. And dedicate. So think of the merit we've created by reflecting and meditating on the Buddha's teachings of dependent arising and emptiness. So rejoice in one's own merit, the merit of others, the merit of all sentient beings and all the Buddha, all enlightened beings. So by the force of this merit, may the Guru's lives be long and stable. May the Buddha Dharma flourish. And may all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering, especially hunger, thirst, war, and violence, and natural disasters, loneliness, depression, other mental illnesses. And especially may all beings quickly, we ourselves and all of the sentient beings quickly generate the wisdom, realizing selflessness and dependent arising. And through that, generate the insight to quickly eliminate all causes of suffering and all problems in the world, and bring about lasting peace and happiness and harmony among beings. And then especially may the Ocean of Compassion Center and all its activities flourish now and far into the future, and continue to increase and be able to offer more and more benefit to sentient beings through educational programs and charitable projects and so forth, and have all the conducive conditions to do so. And then add any other prayers, bring to mind any other prayers you'd like to make. So may all of your aspirations also be fulfilled in accordance with your wishes. Okay, so we stop there. Any questions or comments before we depart?
Thomas Rinpoche's way was very helpful for me, because if I don't start with, okay, well, what does exist, then I get discombobulated by the end of the whole. What am I trying to? I end up on the wrong object of negation, and
you fall into nihilism. Yeah, that's a danger. Yeah, that's what they usually. I mean, in the typical text, it recommends thinking. Well, when you negate find that the I is not inherently one. The agra is not inherently separate. So it doesn't exist. But to recognize that, but I'm here meditating.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is someone here doing something. Yeah. Yeah, it's very helpful, that method. But you don't find that description, of looking for the I somewhere if it exists in the body, looking for it in the mind. That's kind of, I'm sure Rinpoche got it from somewhere else. I'm not sure where from, but it's not typically found in presentations on emptiness.
Yeah, that was very good, because it's easy to see that, the I that gets irritated when my dog nips is a dependent arising. That's simple. So, but, yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all then. Yeah, I hope we can meet again soon, in about 6 hours or so. Okay.
See you in our evening and your morning.
Yes, my morning. Yeah, I'm going to try to sleep between now and then.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.